in the world. So, starting with this idea of unlocking collective genius and transforming systems, I wanted to share at the very end of the administration, we ran this very cool conference that the president had us do, looking at the frontiers that are available to us. And we split it into these sections. The first one being like personal frontiers, personalized medicine, personal learning, all the opportunities in that. And we had Americans from all over the country who were innovating in these areas. Local, we looked at not only smart cities, but wise communities. Some of my favorite presenters was a group from rural Kentucky, BitSource, Drillbit, Source Code. It was coal miner entrepreneurs who are now reshoring jobs to America by just training people in sort of coding boot camps and doing amazing technical things, in a tiny town. So what can we do as community was sort of the local front. The national front was, we focused on AI because we had done the first reports for the country and first work on AI, and I'm going to show you something on that, and released a report there. Global, of course, is around climate change, is around opportunities in green energy, and the systems thinking that we have planet-wise. And then interplanetary, we had Blue Origin, SpaceX, a lot of Lockheed, a lot of our different Boeing commercial companies that are now taking us into near Earth space, as well as NASA looking at the frontiers. On that day, we launched the first artificial intelligence reports, both an overall look from the president's office, as well as a national R&D strategy. The thing I wanted to bring your attention to, which is the bottom left, is in order to do that, we talked to a lot of people. One of my favorite things that colleagues on my team organized across as we were doing this work, and this is really a broad look across all of government and all of society. We did these open town halls with the different teammates in different universities. So University of Washington, legal and governance. With CMU, we were looking at safety and control with NYU. And so it was open conversation. And it reminded me, my ex-partner, Kara Swisher, did a series of work with Newt Gingrich and with Jim Barksdale of Netscape right before George Bush came into office. And they did these open town halls all around at the beginning of like what is now the commercial internet and looking at this thing. So how do you get more Americans involved in the conversation? And I really preferred this way of doing things, opening it up. And there was an NAE forum earlier this week, so I grabbed this slide from a presentation I was doing, and there's kind of these two futures. When we were kids in Buffalo, we used to play Star Trek. And in a hilarious form, every single kid in my neighborhood grew up to be their character. Of course, I used to play Scotty. There's not as many roles for girls, but in Star Trek, there are roles for girls, but not that many. So, but it's sort of like, do we want what Van Jones calls sort of the Jetson future, or the live long and prosper where the computer's helping us? Or do we want the future that's a little scarier at the end of 2001, where we're not sure where as the computer takes over? In this particular forum, it was about engineering practice and where we're going. And so I had just done a simple ChatGPT prompt of engineering then, engineering now. And I have a shout out to the solar car team on the left. That's us cutting some crazy piece of aluminum in then tiny shop for those who are mechies in the bottom of building 3. But this is what's available to us in opening up the engineering practice. Continuing, I think we will continue, of course, if we look at the bottom, textbooks, lectures, we're going to continue to have that, but also simulations, etc. So there's this amazing capability. And one of the things that could happen as technology becomes more available is we can broaden participation on the design side. More people involved. My son, who's one of my younger son, is doing mechanical engineering. He was noting, why is it that the engineering students are taking liberal arts classes, but the liberal arts students are not taking very many engineering classes? And can we cross-pollinate, and can we use some of the capabilities that we have to broaden participation? I wanted to bring up my favorite example of, even though we're in the middle of these conversations about AI, it's really about human intelligence. And I don't know, probably people who have children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews, you know everything about Moana. But this is real life Moana. The Hawaiians, using these Polynesian sailing vessels, can sail around the world, can sail with no instruments. Yeah, like imagine 12 of us on a boat in the middle of the Pacific where that's, near the star. Which way do we go? And they know where to go. One of my favorite things they did in community organizing when they came home from the worldwide voyage, which they did, was they organized kind of a hackathon for all of the young people of Hawaii, and they were working on the Alawai Canal behind Waikiki, and they looked at how can they make it less polluted. So it was their form of the same kind of science fair that I got to do as a young person, and amazing solutions. So thinking about human intelligence and how we can be empowering each other. We hosted them during the astronomy night at the White House. So here's the Rose Garden with the oldest navigators, and then of course the NASA commercial crew as they were getting started. We all know, a lot of us know about Vannevar Bush, who was FDR's science advisor, and he was dean of engineering in the 20s and 30s, Raytheon founder. He's the author of this extraordinary piece, Science, the Endless Frontiers. And I grabbed on the red piece there, there's the Rad Lab. Remember Building 20? The Rad Lab has a 5-year yearbook that they have. And inside of it, they talk about how science before World War II was in some ways poverty. That, Galileo had to find the Medicis. If you didn't have money, you couldn't do things. But as they figured out during the war, to fund goals, radar and jet engines and other things, and give money to the universities, have students and everybody get involved and really push for the development. They then pivoted through this essay to found the NSF. And the thing that I want to highlight that I hadn't seen when I read it later was that Vannevar Bush said in it that it can be achieved only by releasing the full creative and productive energies of the American people. So how do we create the kind of belonging and expansive inclusion on the technical side as part of our opportunity as a community, as a country, and as a world? And I give a shout out in the bottom there to the land-grant universities, which MIT is one, which in the 1860s, we got money from land grant with University of Massachusetts. But this idea of really fueling the country with capabilities through universities, community colleges, HBCUs, tribal colleges, and others, so that we could generate talent as well as innovation and spin it out. And yet at the same time of all this great stuff, people are afraid. They feel like they may not be included. We have a lot of challenges with the algorithms we have. If you haven't seen Kathy O'Neill's TED Talk, she's an incredible engineer who really did a lot of work around algorithmic challenges. Joy Buolamwini's PhD from MIT Media Lab around face recognition bias that really has changed our industry. There's challenges with the electorate. This is an amazing animation of how Congress is voting together and eventually not. How divided they've become, or how extreme we're becoming with how we think about our president over time. The algorithms are challenging us around individual harms and collective harms. On the left is an incredible summary that someone from my team put together later in the Future Privacy Forum, just a literature audit from actually 2017 of what was existing in problems, but also on the right, my favorite chart, what might we do about them? So, and we look at AI, it's applied to a lot of commercial areas and certain areas in the world, but Africa's not even listed on this projection. And so how are we going to get everybody? Because there's talented people all over the world. So sometimes I would look at things together. These are two places in the desert, and some people might recognize them. The top one is Burning Man. The bottom was the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan near the Syrian border, and they're really the same size and the same budget, but they're governed completely differently. Of course, the upper one is born out of joy and the lower one is born out of sadness, but really there's talent in both places that can really do a lot of things, but we don't structure it so that we're empowering the talent. I like to put pictures next to each other so we can sort of reflect on what we're doing at a systems level, and try to think about how to adjust our systems for more inclusion and more kindness. When the Apollo 11 mission went, a lot of people don't know, but the Poor People's Campaign protested. And of course, they were proud Americans. This is Ralph Abernathy, we're going to the moon. But at the same time, if we can get ourselves organized to do this, why can't we address other topics in this way? Poverty and inclusion and safety and other things. So what can be the inclusive future? That's sort of the idea here. So there's a bunch of methodologies that we noticed. And so I wanted to share some of them. And the first one is Scout and Scale, which is really what VCs do. They don't make companies, they find amazing people and support those teams to do the thing, find the doers and help them. You can look across the country and you could see, say, in West Virginia on the left here, this man's having to get water for his family. There's no WeWork makerspace in that cool brick building back there, but there could be, and he could get in that car and drive to Chattanooga. And in Chattanooga, he'd find the highest speed internet in the Western Hemisphere at that time. So why can things not be, how do we community organize for more innovation everywhere? So when the UN was doing the United Nations solutions, they were doing the Sustainable Development Goals. We social stormed the world asking who's already fixing these things. Because with 8 billion people, someone somewhere is probably doing something interesting. We found that we got in the first year, 800 submissions from 130 countries in 3 weeks. By the time we were in our fifth year, 1,400 submissions in 3 weeks from 141 countries. People just solving things. One group was flying drones in the bottom left to plant 1 billion trees a year. The group up top teaching law in prison so you could get yourself out of prison because you hadn't had representation. Micro enterprise around lighting in Burkina Faso with the Princess Mechanical Engineer there. There was a group doing Fab Labs, the Center for Bits and Atoms and this idea of makerspaces. So instead of the cut down the tree job, you could be part of maybe the Moderna vaccine from the Amazon. And in fact, there's a really vibrant community already there in Latin America and all over the world. Fab Lat, sort of all the different communities working together. So we hosted entrepreneurs at the UN. I'll just point out one, Bernice in the middle there. She made bamboo bikes. She grows bikes, sequesters carbon. And so surrounding them with entrepreneurial support, venture capitalists, coaches, etc., to move forward on their amazing things. Nigerian leader who was teaching thousands of women and getting them into the tech sector. So just this idea of who's already doing the thing, and are they in your city? Are they in the city next door? Are they around the world? And how do we accelerate the doers? Second practice is about building communities of practice, which is a guild, really, if you think about it. And so the Fab community, which most people in these places don't know, there's Fab Labs, maker spaces, and these kinds of communities available, but they teach the Fab Academy, Fab Academy, all sorts of things. And there's people who are doing things, we see this around the country, who are creating STEM centers and really fun music, other types of things in small towns. When we were in Boise, Idaho, we found 15 tech meetups. One of them has 800 people in it, but people don't know each other. These are tech meetups around the world. We reached out from MIT and the MIT Solve program. Some of you may know that, to create an Indigenous Communities Fellowship. And we now have, I think we're in our 8th cohort of Native American innovators on reservations who are now interconnected. Island innovators, supporting them doing their thing to solve local problems. Women innovators from Vital Voices. Innovators who are solving around better fluency in tech. We created Computer Science for All, which was a community of practice of all the computer science teachers who were already delivering, coding and computer science to kids, that we could make a fluency for all of them. And this amazing DQ Institute who had a framework. We hosted a White House Tech meetup of all of the meetups that we could find. 50 of them came, and 50 people who were onboarding. So again, this is sort of this idea of communities of practice, and how can you leverage that to have people be in an apprentice journey mastery methodology to bring more people. We also did this with a thing called TechHire when coding boot camps were coming out. There's more people, there's more open STEM jobs. There's as many people in prison as there are STEM jobs that are open. And when you teach tech in prison, you get maybe 7 to 10% recidivism instead of 60 to 70%. So there's talent bases all around, and sometimes something that's a problem can become a solution to another situation. So we started a tech jobs touring. We went, this is Cleveland, speed mentoring, all over the country. We went and said, got people connected. We even found extraordinary things like coding boot camps in a playground in a container ship along the Mississippi. So all over our country, people are getting things done, but people don't know each other. So the more we can use community practices, the better. It's not a new idea. George Washington Carver trained 10,000 farmers a month on how to rotate crops and do new agriculture techniques through a roadshow. Okay, so next practice is called Network the Disconnected Networks. And one of my favorite things about MIT, which we all know, and of course, this is very much codename Mr. Smith, George Eastman, who funded the campus that we were able to move into in 1922. But the professor who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry last year noted that one of his favorite things is he can walk out of his office and bump into colleagues from all different disciplines. So this idea of MIT connecting all of us through the infinite corridor and through interconnected subjects from music, to physics, to the nano building over there, all of us being tripping into each other and letting the subjects come together is an essential thing that we learned at MIT. And it's one of the things that President Obama was doing with us, which asking people to come serve their country, just rotate in. And we were able to get thousands of Americans to come from the commercial sector and rotate into government, into these presidential innovation fellows and other kinds of things, the U.S. Digital Service, the CTO team, and more straight into the agencies. And we would work on policy, and we would work on improving websites. We would work on the census team and others to open up APIs to data sets that were just sitting dusty. The data sets from USGS and other things fly off the shelf, but maybe data sets from HUD aren't so active, but we can come. This is one of the innovation fellows made a single page map that was so helpful to the Department of Labor to see the flow of data around training and wages. What if every agency had a one page? So it's cross fluency of having, not just thinking of tech as IT and I come get you when I need you, or you make me a website, but we're together architecting. We see this in the safety summits whenever we can get more of the people on the right, who are some of the socio-tech experts, together with the commercial folks and the government leaders, we make progress on AI policy work. These are chief science officers we came across, kids who are elected, starting in Arizona. There's, I think, 500 of them in Pennsylvania, just genius innovations that are cross-pollinating. This is a movie that's made. And so the next one is about prototyping. We all learned prototyping. So bringing those practices, hackathons, we've seen this around. We did a foster care hackathon. And so we had policy people, technical people, everybody working together on how to do this. And eventually this led to moving billions of dollars of policy funding to much more effective opportunities for solving foster care challenges for our young people who we, the state, are in charge of helping raise. This is Grace. She's in 10th grade. She's teaching the police chief in New Orleans how to code. And so we had the police data initiative. So how do you do criminal justice reform? Can you open up use of force data sets and get over here? You see all of these cities who are all opening up data sets and workshopping by finding that Dallas was already opening these and then getting people to do it across their whole ecosystem of existing community practice and forms they had. We did this with the pay gap, 300 data scientists across different regions. We're working on hacking the pay gap and coming up with apps and solutions that would really advance our economy. So just prototyping. The last two, circulating stories and sharing data. This is one that builds confidence. One of my favorite things we did in the White House was having science fair. And so here's President Obama with some kids from Oklahoma. They've made a page-turning robot. They're a Girl Scout troop in FIRST Robotics. Of course, shout out to Woody Flowers, who worked with Dean Kamen on this, now with hundreds of thousands of children in this. These kids, the president asked them, how did you do this? And they said, well, we had a brainstorming. And he said, okay, and then what'd you do? And they said, well, we built some prototypes. And so think about it. What if when you're this age, you get to wear capes, have fun with your friends, and brainstorm and prototype for problem solving in the world? How would your confidence profile change? So telling these stories matters. There's also challenges that we face, like the storytelling that's happening. These are 2000 films. Who gets to speak by gender? So those kids face this, men's lines to women's lines. How do we know, how to create more balance? How do we hear men and women? How do we know that Ada Lovelace invented algorithms at the time of Darwin? And she has kind of cool hair, if you look at that. That Alan Turing and Joan Clark were a team as they cracked the Enigma codes and saved 11 million lives and shortened World War II by 2 years with mathematics, and know that the Duchess of Cambridge, now Princess of Wales, that her grandmother and great aunt were code breakers at Bletchley Park, that women were the original computer scientists in the ENIAC team, Grace Hopper, MIT Whirlwind, or the Colossus, that Jane Addams, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for in really creating social work and was considered the most dangerous woman in America for a while, but really brought in solutions, was using massive amounts of data science for smart cities at the time. That, Bessie Coleman was working with Fokker on fixing and creating new air technologies. That, of course, our own Ellen Swallow Richards was busy bringing ecology forward for us. That Ida B. Wells was a data scientist for justice and did the red record on justice technologies. And that at the time of the Chicago World's Fair, where Nikola Tesla showed up, Ellen was there with the test kitchens, Frederick Douglass of Rochester and Ida B. Wells protested that fair. And they protested not because they didn't love the idea of the fair, but that they wouldn't let any African American exhibitions. None. And so they wrote this paper, The Reason Why the Colored American is Not in the World's Columbian Exhibition. And it's full of a list of all the extraordinary millionaires and patent holders and sculptors and architects who we would have seen in 1892. And a little shout out on the left to Josephine Cochran, who invented the dishwasher. She won the mechanical prize at the fair, and she had 9 full working dishwashers. And you use her dishes, her washer, exactly the design basis of today's dishwasher. And then her company, of course, came in to become KitchenAid. But how would the world be different if we could have had more balance at this time in our storytelling? And what can we do to change that? And to see all of us and the innovation that we have. And we started doing some of that work. Of course, Katherine Johnson, who calculated us to the moon, our own Margaret Hamilton, who, when she was at MIT, these pictures are from MIT. That's the code she wrote or led for the lunar lander and the Apollo command modules. She said she used to work on the top of the Green Building sometimes, so you can imagine her up there. The Mercury 13, who never got to fly, and the Mercury 7. This is some interesting data that we got helping Hollywood a little bit with who gets to speak in TV. And this is Star Wars on the left. And slowly we're getting more breadth of humanity to be able to speak in these movies. But this was a project that USC did that we funded from Google with Gina Davis Institute of trying to support who gets to speak in films and what can we do to improve media balance. I got to work on the amazing beginnings of smartphones at General Magic, and the team had spun out from Apple. And I just wanted to share that when I got to see a lot of the movies and things come out, a lot of times the Jobs movies and other movies only show the guys from the teams. But Joanna Hoffman on the left is a fabulous physics course 8 graduate who's Steve Jobs' sparring partner. And the bottom right, you see Susan Kerr, who is probably the most prolific artist in the world because everything on your phone are the graphics that she started with for the Mac, working with Bill Atkinson, who created Quick Draw. So I got to work with all these people, so I know more about how they actually work, but the media was always imbalanced in the storytelling. So last one was just some work that we did around inclusion and belonging and making everybody feel part and accelerated in organizations. And this is a bit of an eye chart, but I'll send it to you guys. It's in the NAE in some of their publications, but it's actions you can take to build more inclusion and belonging, achieve advancement around leadership, retention, hiring pathways, and ecosystem. What's the move? What's the practice, and how do you measure it? We called it raise the floor because the more we learn the minimum practices of including each other and creating belonging, the better. So just to summarize, there's all these incredible capabilities we all learned at MIT, people learned, that have to do with, I call them the studio ones, prototyping and building. There's a lot of practice around people just meeting each other and scouting for solutions and accelerating them. Especially in the White House, we would find that one city had a solution and no one knew. How do you get Wichita to share with Miami? As an example, Miami had closed, they had gone from 47,000 people in prison. They'd gone from 7,000 to 47,000 and closed a jail and saved $12 million. How can we get more people to do that? And then storytelling. I think that it's time for us to really push. This is an idea that the Canadians came up with. It's a little bit like a Hippocratic oath. We have it in the US, but some kind of thing that we think about as like Hippocratic, an iron ring, which the Canadians have from a bridge that fell down. But how do we help in engineering have the kind of responsibility that we need and encourage our young people to come in these directions, especially as AI can go in dangerous ways as well as good ways. And certainly technology, when you create a ship, you also create pirates. So how do we think about that? And then I'll just reflect on this, which is the very first penny that was created in the United States said this on it. It said liberty, like our pennies and our coins today, but it also said the parent of science and industry. This was Franklin, Jefferson, and Washington, somehow connecting science and innovation into freedom, which I think is worth reflecting on. And so sort of thinking about the opportunity we all got to have this extraordinary education and connection to each other, which for me really has its roots in Western New York from my original learnings from family and projects and challenges around our community that people sort of ran at, like the Love Canal mothers and families, like the people who solved, problems all around the city. For us, that we got to see that role modeling. But how do we get more of our fellow citizens into this? So I'll end there. And just great to be with you guys. And if there's any questions or thoughts or reflections or clarifications, I've sort of talked for a while, but I'm trying to share a lot of different possibilities with everybody. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Megan. We haven't, I think it's because I feel like, they at MIT, they say fire hose bit, I mean, things are coming very fast. I invite people, if you've got any questions, to put them in now, because we've got none while we was talking, but I had a couple, we have a couple actually from Ken and I right now, just to start us off. And the first one is, can we get a copy of your slides to post on our website?
Sure, definitely.
Okay, I'll have Ken figure out how we're going to get them to you. My question, just to start us off, I had a number of them, but I'd be curious as to what was your budget? A little about when you were Chief Technology Officer at the White House. What was your budget, and how many people on the staff? Can you give us an idea of how large an activity it was?
Sure. And it's interesting because if you think a little bit about the team at the White House versus the agencies, in a company, you might call it the corporate team versus the divisions, right? So the Department of Agriculture or NASA or Department of Labor, or the different regulatory agencies, they're all running their things. They have their budgets, the national budget comes that way. The central team at the White House, we were in a group called Office of Science, Technology, Policy. So there's various policy councils that are with the president as advisory to help them execute their vision, and also with inflow from the American people, from other agencies, and coordinating and collaborating. So the president's science advisor, who was Dr. John Holdren, who was also MIT teammate, amazing, extraordinary, 8 years of service. And then the US CTO was a new job that President Obama added, wanting somebody at a senior level who had more of kind of a tech commercial background to go with the science advisor who has more of an academic or labs type background. So officially we had 3 people or 4 people, I think we had head count for, but we had 25 people in our team. And the way that we did that was there's a couple different ways that you can add people to a White House team. And one of them is from the War Powers Act, it's detailing. So if the NIST team, or in the case of, we brought the first ever US chief data scientist into my team, Deputy CTO DJ Patel, who was the data scientist for LinkedIn. And so we were lucky for Francis Collins from NIH hired him officially because he was going to spend a third of his time on the precision medicine initiative. And then he's detailed officially into the White House. So instead of sitting at NIH, you're sitting in the White House, but you have certain responsibilities to your home agency. Another person, Corey Zarek, who was deputy CTO, She came from archives. What's the incentive for archives to give a head count to the White House? Well, if we can get more, she was actually the lead for the US for for the open government plans. So you're a central person who's coordinating across all the agencies. We are lucky in OSTP, the Office of Science Technology Policy, that we're associated with something called the National Science and Technology Council. It's an STC. There's one person in OSTP who coordinates that, but it's a way that all the agencies can be connected on a science or technology topic. For example, STEM education or environmental issues or something in national security to coordinate across. So she was able to get that with all the open government teammates and really herding cats of getting everyone to put together an open government plan and get agency to commit to whatever openness in government they were going to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Looks like, I'd say hundreds, sounds like by the time you finish with adding all this up. There's some more questions coming in, and I'd like to get to them. Shanti M, would you like to ask your question? And if not, I can read it. Don't forget to unmute.
Sure. First of all, thanks. Wonderful to hear your presentation. Appreciate that very much. I guess the question was, related to, the whole host of initiatives you had and you launched during your time at the White House. Which of those were, you feel like sticky, or that were able to sort of be carried forward, and which ones were harder to do without sort of that continuous sort of tending and focus?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It sort of varies a lot. And it also varied with which agencies we were working with. I think that, for example, the ones I was talking about APIs. So the US Census team, the administrative census was fabulous. And they have actually an innovation lab right next to the cafeteria. And so they had to just open it. People got accustomed to kind of going in there and sort of brainstorming and moving along. So being able to open up a methodology for getting a lot more data out of different agencies and helping agencies through census to do that was a really good thing. And so we structured that. It was called the Opportunity Project. And so I still continue to see solutions, either whether they're out of the agencies or third-party apps that come that are similar to, how US Geological Survey flies off the shelf into your phone every day for your mapping, right? Or the National Weather Service data comes into your phone every day for $1 billion of weather industry. So we started to see a lot of that. I also think some of the policy work that we were doing around net neutrality, around encryption, around AI. The next groups continued to push forward on the next waves of that. So that went pretty well. And then I always bucketed our stuff in 3 buckets, and I'll put a link to it. One is like the policy centric work. Second was capacity build this government, which is things like the Presidential Innovation Fellows, getting tech to come rotate into government, as well as surfacing more of the technologists who are in government, who are extraordinary, to be in the main rooms. In government, when I was in Silicon Valley, the tech folks are in charge and the poor policy people in comms, you guys know this from companies, are like trying to get a word in edgewise. And you go in a government and it flips. And the policy and comms people are in charge and the tech people aren't even invited to the meeting. So I think we were able to successfully get a lot more tech people to be included. I think the Doge effort is a similar kind of effort. I really don't agree with Elon's structure of blasting the amazing federal workforce and firing so many people. I'm not a fan of that. I thought it was much better to come in and team up with these extraordinary people and ask them what they were doing, and then try to make it way more efficient and effective and help empower them. They have a huge job to do and they know a lot, but they may not have had the kind of resources that, say, a commercial person had had. So if you can offer that, you can really change that. So those were some of the things I think we did really well, upgrading government systems and really bringing things in. Last thing I'll add is I learned from Nicholas Negroponte that Jerry Wiesner was in the actual West Wing with Kennedy. And I think one of the things that was really special about President Obama is he was very interested in science and technology. And even though we weren't sitting in the West Wing, we were sitting just next door, and we were often in the West Wing with him, he really pushed for that, and I think Kennedy pushing brought us to the moon. I think we wouldn't have gone to the moon if Wiesner hadn't been in the West Wing. I think the proximity was significant.
There's several more questions, so I want to get moving along here.
Yeah.
Michael Sisti, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hey, good evening. My question was how you see our information environment impacting our ability to engage and collaborate. On one hand, we have these amazing resources of information available and new analytical tools to access and analyze and engage that information and connect with each other. But we also have unprecedented amounts of distractions with media and algorithms trying to take our attention. So if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. I think there's a couple things. One was I don't know if people came across something called Project Alamo. It's less known, but hyper targeting of people is something that one of the campaign teams is using. So you're seeing it with both all the campaign teams, but in elections, certainly this sort of propagandized. I mean, there's been propaganda from the beginning. President or Benjamin Franklin started a publishing network, really trying to upgrade the colonial publishing network in the earliest of days of our country because of misinformation, and sort of deployed a lot of his cousins to the colonial presses to get them to upgrade the quality there. I think today we face so many challenges. I mean, we're seeing it with young people. And sort of this, what we see in in the schools. MIT just came out with an extraordinary, so not just the information landscape, but also the use of ChatGPT and large language models. Some of it is really diminishing people's capabilities to do critical thinking. And so what I'm interested in doing is identifying these problems and then running at them together. We are MIT people, we're used to hard challenges. And these are probably some of the hardest challenges we face. The devices, the creators are, a lot of people would just like to take your attention, right? And so my recommendation is that we look for people who already have key solutions and try to make those well known, because there's already stuff that works that's with us. It's just not known by a lot of people. Let's do more of that, and let's do less of the stuff that doesn't work, and then run at the things that are still the challenges there. But and somebody in the chat was saying something about like what would be a call to action. That's one of them. How do we take our can do, or whether it's demo or die, mens et manus, and the unwritten one at core and love? How do we take our can do capabilities and apply them more broadly to not only the things that are obviously science and tech, but really play the whole orchestra, science, tech, arts, literature, et cetera, on the hardest problems? And these are certainly some of them.
Okay, that question was actually from Robert Wickham. I know Roger Wickham, that's why. Robert Wickham in Australia.
Robert.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's morning there, I think, if I got it right. Early in the morning. Did she answer your question when she made reference to it? But Robert, do you want to unmute? Sorry, there. Unmute and ask it.
I'll just add to that. Hi, nice to see you, Megan, as always.
Yeah.
Great presentation. I wonder if you can just expand on that, particularly for international alumni like myself that are living on the other side of the planet where the signal is not as strong. What do you see as the call to action for us, and how can we best help move the needle?
I think, in a lot of ways, I think the most important thing we can do is unlock people's creative confidence as just a general goal. It's certainly something that was done for us. And the more people, I don't know how many people got to take acoustics with Professor Bose. If you did, like, raise your hand or something, but unbelievable, right? And the thing that he did at the end of the semester, I think he drew a bell curve, and on the right-hand side, he's like, you guys are such performers. You're just going to be performing. But the key thing you have to do is find your passion. And if you find things you're passionate about, you're going to be unstoppable. You're going to be able to do extraordinary things. And so I think, we've got 8 billion colleagues, and we have a lot of problems. and we need the surface area of creative confidence to solve them. And certainly some of our colleagues are doing some pretty bad things. So we also need some of us to pile on and reduce those approaches. So I guess it's more of a general call to all of you, Robert, if in your ask is the things you care about, how can you apply or encourage more people? How can you share more of a can-do attitude for people who are pretty depressed right now, or they feel like we can't, I don't know how to belong. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what the future is going to be like. How do we kind of step up to show the way by really sharing what works in communities more rapidly with each other and using the internet itself for more rapid sharing of positive, like we did going to the UN. And I knew that if the UN ratified the Sustainable Development Goals and we didn't do anything to share that they're already being worked on, in fact, by thousands and millions of people all over the world, that they would go into a mode of sort of structuring a way to then implement rather than just, oh my God, why don't we just help all of you flourish?
Okay. So now next question isn't so much a question, but more a comment and see whether you have any response to it. Robin Slinger. Sorry there. Sorry, Robin, for massacring your last name. You have a comment about Love Canal. Would you like to present it? Maybe not. Hey, you're unmuting?
Love Canal. It looks like there's amazing.
You're looking at it. Yeah, you see, it's nice. You see the same thing.
Yeah, so Professor Robert Heitz is working. That's great.
You know?
I don't know how many people have seen. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Professor Ronald Heights, when I was working there, we did research on pollutants in the ground and I was busy sampling streams and such. Later on, he left MIT and went to Iowa State or in Bloomfield, Indiana. He went to Bloomfield, Indiana to do research, and he did all of the organic fates and all of the pollution fates for Love Canal. He did all of that research.
Amazing. My mom's friend, Mrs. Black, used to teach at the school there, and kids would go in the back and throw rocks together. They would explode. I mean, it's terrible. But this is the kind of, back to Robert's question, what you guys did, Robin, is like you did something about it. It isn't, and actually, and let me see if I can find this amazing picture. I was lucky to work with a woman named Robin Moore, who Frank Moore made this painting. So this is, of course, Niagara Falls is our beloved Niagara Falls. And we lit Buffalo with it. This is Western New York's legacy, but we also created such a mess. All the chemical companies just dumping. And this is this painting that's in the Albright Knox Art Gallery. Can you see, if you kind of look closely at the water, the chemical formulas?
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? And it's really sort of, there's this beautiful place, but there's this lurking, not so great situation. And, I was lucky to, be and you all were too. The first Earth Day, my mom organized a ride of bike, car, bus, and walking commuters from the end of Buffalo to downtown. She was so happy because the bike won. And they started all the bike routes that they tried to get some of the right of ways along the river to be able to get to Niagara Falls. But, a lot of our community in Western New York really pushed hard for what is now cleaning up a lot of the country and the world. There's still a lot to do, but one of the exciting things that I saw recently was the teams in the engine were doing this nano filtering for chemicals, and you could just see sort of where chemical engineering can go into new ways, and maybe we can have a cleaner future.
Okay. This is a quick one. Pete wants to know, I think, or I'll just ask you, what year did you graduate with a BSME from MIT?
Class of 86. And then I stayed in Media Lab right when the new building was, when of the old, I always tell the students now, when the old building was new, and then was there for 87 and 88. And we did the 87 solar car race the first race was Switzerland and then Australia, and those were kind of together. And we were really lucky because Doc Edgerton gave James Warden, our main founder, space in Building 20. So we got to build the car and all of that. So great
I
fun.
remember Edgerton was sailing around the Charles when I was there. He always looked around, past him. Very friendly guy. He knew he was friendly to everybody. He was a nice guy.
And for that,
I'm more,
yeah.
okay. How about got your name correct? G Quay
Uh,
has got a rather a little bit longer question for you. G Quay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so Jay, thank you. I had a kind of a specific question. So, in my day-to-day, we have these summer virtual teacher trainings around STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and more recently around care and compassion, as that seems to really strike a chord with our teachers. And what happens is we have this beautiful community that's there during these week-long intensive sessions. But then, once the school year begins, it kind of disappears. And we've had teachers say they would love to stay in touch. They find this experience nourishing. But the practical side of building a community of practice, I was wondering if you had advice, because teachers are busy, but they also say they want this. We've tried social media, things like that, but we're all human. We have so much going on. And I was wondering if you had advice for like successes to get beyond the activation energy of the early bits. Yeah, thank you.
I think I think it's a really important point because it's one of the hardest things. And I sometimes call this, it's like not a fancy term, but the glue layer. The glue layer, which is the people who would organize the communities of practice and the people who are organize TEDx talk, that group of people who's always sort of community organizing innovation. There's not as much funding for that as
Mhm.
there is for the project. And it's something I think we need to support the philanthropic world, the commercial world, to notice that the interconnection of us has massive value and great results come out of it, that cross sharing. So, a lot of times, if you can get the group to kind of self organize, and you can't fully self organize, but creating so that you don't have to carry it all,
Yeah.
finding people like the chief science officer youth, instead of having to help all them, they self-organize a bit now.
Mm.
So I think creating roles in the community of practice, in some ways, our MIT alumni clubs are communities of practice, right? And so creating roles so that we can be structured in certain ways and enough community of the group that's doing a little bit of the heavy lift. So it's fun, and then making sure that really great things are coming out, like you guys, like how amazing to have each other, right? In a region, it helps with careers, it helps with thinking, it helps with passion, it helps with friends. It's just families, etc. It's a good thing.
Jim Boyd, our club president, has a question for you. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, Megan, maybe I get a little bit scared when we talk about, building sort of online communities by what we've seen happen, with some of our social networks, and it sort of devolves into political bickering or worse, right? Streaming. And so how do we build communities and systems to promote communities without letting it devolve that way?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I guess what I often did, like I ran an internet company called Planet Out, which was the gay community online in the early days of the web. And mostly the chat rooms, remember in early 1990, think of 1996, 97, 98 internet, it was a lot of chat rooms, message boards, some content, right? So we would see mostly good behavior, mostly people who wanted to connect to each other, but every so often, like really bad sort of gay bashing people would come into those chat rooms, right? And so we had different ideas and ways to get them to stop, but it's hard. And so you would have to have sort of monitors and others to help. There's a book that was called Net Gain that was written in the 90s. I don't know. I know there's a Harvard person, and I don't know if there's an MIT person in it. But one of the chapters is called The Gardener's Touch. And it's about how these online communities are like a garden, and you have to constantly like highlight as well as weeding. And you have to really, back to the question about sort of this glue layer, you have to have some amount of attention to that. And then now the algorithms, I saw a graphic recently that's showing that in social media, just the outliers, the more extremists are getting so much, we can all see it all day, so much more acceleration and coverage and time, when really more people are actually in the middle. I saw there was the most incredible art exhibit here, Arts Technica did it, and it was the Twitter stream. And at the time, it was a couple of years ago, but it was showing all the stuff that people were actually sharing at scale in this beautiful visualization. And there was so much great stuff people were sharing that I think no one's seeing. And so, how can we actively do stuff about that? How do we get in there and come up with solutions? And again, I always feel like it's so much easier when I'm like, what should we do about X? To instead look up and like, I wonder who's doing, oh, there you are, or there you are, there you are, people who are doing things already. It's less, it just feels like less energy, like expended to go find them and just start helping them to scale.
Okay, yeah, Thomas has a question about more current about what's going on in the current situation. Thomas, why don't you ask it? Don't forget to unmute.
Oh, sure. And great presentation. Thank you very much. It's great to have a little dose of the fire hydrant there. Um, Anyways, I was online when the Obama administration checked out. I was a big fan of OSTP and downloaded a bunch of the reports. And I was downloading reports actually in January 20th, 2017, just as Trump was sworn in. And it was amazing how the minute he swore in, the website disappeared.
Yeah.
Instantly. They shut everything down and you can no longer access those files. Where can those reports be found?
Yes, they're all in, they all go to the archives.
Okay, so I have to go
We
there to get them.
actually, we worked really closely, my colleagues, Jason Goldman, who had come, he was the product manager of Twitter, who had come, and Alex McGilvery, who was general counsel of Twitter, coder lawyer. They worked really closely with two things, both with the National Archives and also with the Internet Archives. So the Wayback Machine does, and the Wayback Machine always does crawls of every administration coming up to transition, right before the election, during transition, and then right after. So they
Right.
capture a
Because it
lot.
went
And and listen, Obama White House .archives.gov is where
right, good.
all of the websites are. So you can go in there. The exit memos are really great. They're right on the front page down below.
That's great information. So I'm glad
Yeah, I'll
they're
put
still
that
around.
in the
But
chat.
anyways, my question goes to the issue of the distortion and the level play in the playing field nowadays. Where public science gets defunded everywhere. Universities are under attack, yet certain corporate entities, under the guise of Doge, like I put on the question, get access to all the government records, census records, IRS records, medical records, etc. How can private people deal with that? I mean, I know before it used to be months of research work just to get a security clearance to do that. Nowadays, it's just at a president's whim, all these ex-cons suddenly have access to everything.
Yeah,
So,
I'm in the same thinking as you, sort of outside of government, like why are we doing this? I think, um, it was extraordinary to see, like, I think many of us, some people are probably in maybe working in government labs, other things, but a lot of us in the technical side, we don't rotate into government. It's not, the lawyers go in and out of government, the operators, it's very natural for them to, if you look at a resume from someone in the legal profession, they will have clerked in the judicial area. But we as technical people, some of us are in government, but a lot are not. So the first point I would make, not about the current situation, but in general, we have to capacity build our governments, and we have to have every profession rotating in and out so that we can have the best of the most effective capabilities at those times. In this particular case, it feels like you're saying much more robber baron, like what are people, where are the rules being followed and where are they not being followed? And so that is on the US Archives and the National Archives, it says, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And so I think part of this is when things are crossing a line, how do we help the country come back from something that feels very scary? with people not following classic rules or firing people without checking to see, what we can learn from them, etc.
Yeah,
I do think if we could really modernize our government in the ways that we were approaching, and those guys are sort of saying they're doing, but it doesn't feel like it. We really could save a lot of money, and we could be way more effective and really help the American people so much more. I mean, I had that experience of seeing how much better it could be. One of my favorite things we were doing in those days was the the digital teams would go to White House to the correspondence team, and they would get all the letters coming into the president, and they would ask them, like from a design thinking perspective, can you show us the 10 worst letters from veterans trying to sign up for healthcare? And then they would go look and see, and then they would, because of the Freedom of Information Act, or not, they're sorry, because of the Paperwork Reduction Act, you can't do the same kind of user design that you might do commercially. You can access only a smaller number of people. So they would just use that to find, 5 people who had really clear problems, and then look at those problems, having to deal with old PDF files to do their forms is ridiculous. And they would use that, and then they would fix it. And so they were just cranking through that in the time they had there. So that's the kind of thing I want to see, and not so much, stealing data and crawling
Right.
things which you shouldn't have access to, etc.
Okay.
Thank you very
Pete?
much.
Very good.
Hey,
Thanks.
Bob, let me
yeah.
just make a comment here. So we're past the hour, and Megan has agreed to stick around for another 5 or 10 minutes to answer, some final questions. But let me kind of wrap it up here, and just thank you, Megan. Really thought-provoking, really inspiring. Yeah, really kind of fills me with some hope and some inspiration. And yeah, those are certainly a couple of qualities that we need, right, in today's world. I want to make a kind of final plug for next month's program here at Club of Rochester. So Christina Birch is an MIT biological engineering PhD, and she's a world-class professional athlete. And in her spare time, she recently graduated from the NASA astronaut training program. So she's going to be joining us on Tuesday, October 14th, to share with us her experiences in the NASA astronaut program and talk about how MIT helped her prepare for being an astronaut and for being a world-class athlete. And so, we'll be getting details out to everybody on that one. So I hope to see a lot of you there. If you need to sign off, good night, everybody. And if anybody has any last questions,
We got a
we're just going
couple.
to stick around for a couple more minutes.
There are some more. Hang on.
Right.
We're getting don't leave yet. I noticed that we've got pretty good. There's still 50 people online last time I checked. So
Yeah,
we
well, I
still
wanted to
got
do my
people
plug
interested.
while I still had a
Oh, that
good
was good.
forum.
Thanks. Yeah,
That
and
was
I
good.
hope sometime that I can be in person in the Rochester and Buffalo when I'm home, and I'm sometimes in a place called Chautauqua. So if you're ever in Chautauqua in the summer,
Yeah.
I'm meganS@gmail if you want to reach me.
Okay. Okay. Now I shorted Pete because I read his question, but this time if he's still there, I'm going to give him an opportunity. Pete, question about shift 7. Don't forget to unmute. Maybe Pete is left. Okay. He asked how shift 7 gets its funding, but
Oh, yeah, what I wasn't trying to like build a company. What I wanted to do was it's just more having a company so there's a structure. But when I left the White House, I had done so much stuff in the commercial world. I wanted to keep working in this more civic tech and civil society tech. And these are areas where they will naturally gravitate towards topics that are not, they won't be doing hackathons. They'll be writing a policy paper. And so how do we kind of play the whole orchestra on that? So we usually often will be hired for something, or will be, like as an example, we decided to do a bunch of sprints around environmental justice. And so we met at a bunch of different people and wanted to build some data science storytelling prototypes. And so one of them is when you guys, many people might have seen the Oppenheimer film. So we met some people from New Mexico, and they'd been fighting for a long time to be able to be included in the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act that Senator Udall was able to get for those from the Nevada test site who were downwinders from nuclear blasts. So as we had tested these nuclear bombs, or as we exploded the Trinity bomb in New Mexico, we really nuked ourselves. And actually, there's a Kodak connection here in the link I just shared, which I'll show you. So what we did in this case was we worked to support. I call it assemble the Avengers, like go find people. Our colleague Tina had the challenge was that they posed this with they weren't able to prove that the clouds really came on them. The government had certain data, but so what we were able to do was work with someone from Princeton who uses the NOAA high split tools and prove this showed that the fallout went to 46 states in 10 days. And so you can see the Trinity explosion here. So this is July 16th, 1945. And you can see the nuclear fallout. Can you guys see that screen? It's going all over the country. So on the day of the Oppenheimer film, we were able to release this article was written about a preprint science study that we published that day showing this. And so you can see, in fact, this is Kodak, an incredible engineer in Kodak figured out that the problems they were having with exposure on the film from cardboard plants in Indiana and Iowa. He was like, what is this? And he was like a point source, something's called, and then Hiroshima happened. He asked the government if they had done this. So he reverse engineered that because the government didn't say that Trinity happened. And so just an amazing findings. This is the fallout across the United States from colleagues. So this is Sebastian Philippe, who's now at Wisconsin, but he works with Princeton also. Susan and I work with who put this whole project together and is the lead. Gil is from NOAA, who we found through colleagues. Mason's a great data scientist at Ode, and myself. So we're looking at the 93 above ground tests in Nevada and the tests here. That's the Trinity test. So we were basically trying to help with the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act challenges. I'm trying to find the photo so you can see what it looks like. So just Nevada was New Mexico was not included in it. And so this was a helpful way to help share. So this is an example, and that particular work was funded by Bezos Earth Fund through a grant to a nonprofit, and then we were included as a fiscally sponsored to do that. Does that make sense?
Okay. Natalia Olive, if you're still here, you want to ask your question about MIT research and government funding, which is very topical today, if I might say. Don't forget to unmute. Okay, what he was saying was, I wonder how these approaches can help fund MIT research without relying on government funds. Any thoughts?
It's a really complicated time. Remember, I was sharing about Vannevar Bush. During the war, FDR, everyone came to understand that this new idea of like really fueling the universities would change things and allowed them to invent radar and jet engines and work on all this stuff. And then they pivoted to create the National Science Foundation. I don't know the exact statistics, but I think it's for every $2 or $3 into the NSF, we get $8 back as a country in terms of value. So it's a pretty good investment. But we're facing challenges, as we know, on the cutting of budgets. I'm hopeful. What I'm hoping is that we're seeing the cuts and not more cuts. We also have challenges that overhead. So one of the great things that allows people to share on universities that the overhead is like 40%. It's the correct amount since the war. And it allows for all kinds of stuff to be, the secretaries, different people are supported and people can share better. That's being cut obviously to lower percentages. And then we're seeing tax on endowment above certain levels. So those three things are a bit of a perfect storm, as we all know, for a lot of universities suffering with, the kinds of cuts similar to what you might have seen, say, in 2008 or more, where we lost a third of these universities. So it's not good. And we have to work together. That's really a call to action. We all have to work together to make the case for why this kind of funding, why the US it's been a really amazing model it's the American research enterprise. I found a piece in a magazine. It was called New England's $1 Trillion Mile. And it starts at Sloan School with Arthur D. Little's original building, goes all the way up to Harvard Square to a company called the High Voltage Engineering Company, which Van de Graaff and actually President's uncle, John Trump, co-founded. It's all the innovation that was in Cambridge. And at the time, Carl Taylor Compton, our president, and Dorier from Harvard Business School founded Modern Venture Capital. The first VC funding was in Boston in 1946 when they realized they could spin out of the universities. So this idea of not only the innovation and the science advancement, but also the talent. And sometimes it's spinning out directly, and sometimes it's the graduate students you're hiring, who are just extraordinary. But one of the results of the war, if I can find it, is that our graduate student population all over the country just doubled. This is a graphic, and I'll show you guys, that shows MIT. See that 1945, all of a sudden we get graduate students at scale. And that's true of all the technical universities everywhere. And this is, the basis of our economy is all that talent, both undergrad and grad, and those who join them.
Yeah.
So important.
Okay.
So the answer is let's all work together to push to keep this. And we're definitely seeing cuts, and let's have less cuts.
Okay. Next one isn't question so much as a quote shameless plug, but I kind of get a kick out of this. Lou, I think it is, if I get it right. And you're in Singapore. That's also kind of amazing. You still around? And what's your shameless plug?
Hi, I am still around, and I'm actually not in Singapore at the moment. I'm in Hong Kong, but I will be in Singapore for a week, attending a machine learning for good boot camp. But my shameless plug is I was doing my PhD at MIT in material science, but I was doing research in machine learning, and then I kind of hard pivoted to education, which is always another passion of mine. And I'm kind of bringing that technical expertise now to what I do in both research and like AI and like neuroscience inspired machine learning for education, as well as just kind of educating and like working with students and teachers. Anyway, my shameless plug was if anyone here, or if you have connections maybe to like the MIT Club of Singapore, I'm doing this workshop version of a course I'm developing, which I'm calling AI Deep Dive for educators, where basically, as I wrote there, it's very intentionally meant to be very different from kind of any other AI course that I've seen out there. Many of which was focused for teachers, especially many of which focus on, how to use this tool to, make your lesson plans or do student assessment. And basically, I believe that, given the importance and the ubiquity of AI in the near future, or arguably now, right, with all these algorithms, it's critical that everyone, not just teachers, not just scientists, engineers, but like everyone, I believe, needs to have some understanding of this technology from, a wider perspective, right? So I touch on things like the history of AI, a bit about the technical foundations, right? Won't go too deep into the math. Things like the social and the environmental, economic impacts of AI, just to really get people to think more deeply about something that would be so consequential. And that, from what I see now, like those aspects aren't discussed enough, right? There's too much of the narrative is driven by these tech companies. No offense to Megan, of course, but who drive the narrative about how amazing this technology will be, how it's all, it will revolutionize everything. Anyway, that's my plug. If people are interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'm looking for people to support in any way.
Okay, your links are in the chat for
Yeah,
anybody.
and I
Go
love
ahead.
what you're working on, and it's super urgent. I'm gonna put this random document in here, two things. Stephen Wolfram Alpha and Mathematica, he once read all of the correspondence between Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace from the 1800s, when Ada invented the concept of AI and algorithms, and when Charles Babbage made the first mechanical computer. So make sure that when you're doing your AI history, you go all the way back to Ada, because she's the founder at the time of Darwin. She said, in a quote, she said, I think we can figure out the math of the cerebrum if we think about it right, like we've done astronomy and sidereal, which is star math. And so she said, I wish to bequeath to the generations a calculus of the nervous system. And then the
That's
other
awesome.
resource, amazing, she's just amazing.
That's
By the way,
yeah.
her father was with Mary Shelley when she wrote Frankenstein. So the same questions you're bringing up about do we raise the monster or not, there from the first industrial age. And I was just in London near Charles Dickens' home where he wrote Oliver. And today we have the equivalent of Oliver Twist, of course, is the ghost workers of the internet who spend time boxing and teaching AI and cleaning porn and cleaning violence and, get almost no money and suffer in the same way. So we're doing the same thing. So I think your insights to teach classes in these broad ways is exactly right. And the more we can do, the better. I was just talking to a guy named Peter Georgescu, who was the head of Young and Rubicam. And he said, in capitalism, we always had the worker there's all these, it's sort of multi-stakeholder capitalism actually was the game. It wasn't always only the shareholder. It's the shareholder, the workers, the community, the company itself in terms of R&D, the environment or the planet. There's these other stakeholders. And so thinking about that, and it turns out when you think that way, you actually are more successful. So something to think about.
Thank
All
you
right.
so
We have
much.
this. Sorry.
Yeah, Bob, I think we have to wrap up here.
There are two more. There's actually only one more question I'd
All
like to
right,
get to
let's
and a
do-
comment, and I was
Let's
going to say
do,
they're just about
all right,
finished.
so this will be final question, and then Megan, if you have any just sort of final wrap-up comments, and we'll call it a day, I think.
Sure.
All right.
First, I want to acknowledge Gail Glance's comment. I'm not, just for time, I'm not going to get it back to her, but she talked about cross-pollination and how, this talk fits in with what went on at Love Canal. People can read it in the chat. But Shanti M., you're going to be the final question. If you're still there, would you read it?
May have gone.
Just look at about half of us are still there. Okay. I'm not sure this is going to make much sense. Then, can you see it there, Megan, rather than having me read it? It's
Which one is that?
It's Shanti M. You started to say something about an MIT study. I just flipped it out of there. Oh,
I'm scrolling back to an MIT study.
yeah, I am too.
Something about an MIT study and also solutions that already exist to address. Yep. Okay, so the study, let's see. I'm going to look at it. It's Media Lab, see if I can find a link. Media Lab just published, they were doing brain monitoring. Yeah, here it is. Your brain on Chat GPT. I think this is it. Yep. Okay. So they took, I don't know the study's whole details, but they took 3 different situations. I just put that in there. You guys can look. And they were looking at sort of the cognitive activity when you're using LLMs in a couple of different cases. I think one of the groups was asked questions. And they weren't just like they weren't just using the LM to answer all the questions. They were forced to try to reflect and learn, make an attempt on the question themselves. Anyway, you guys should read it. I don't know the whole thing, but they looked at 3 different cases, and it was really clear that there's good ways to use this for learning, and we should, as Hi was talking about and others, and there's some really dangerous ways that just reduce people's critical thinking and capabilities, or they don't really learn at the level that we need. We want to challenge our young people and all people to learn it.